Hi, welcome to Painting with Yuk-Sem. Today we're going to be painting a red sunset with the sailboat, and I will bring you through the step-by-steps of the acrylic painting. I'll be showing you what colors, brushes, and tips and tricks to use while you're doing the painting, hopefully with me or on your own time. And let's get started. So I'm using acrylic paints, and I'm going to start right away with my larger brush, and I'm going to go right into the white. I've added a little bit of water, and that helps to get the paint to spread a little bit more on the canvas. So in the middle of the canvas where I've chosen the sun to be, I'm going to start just with a circle, a white circle. And you don't really see it, but it'll give you a good starting point to add the rest of your colors. I'm going to go, without washing my brush, I'm going to go right into the yellow and go on top, half on top of the white and half on the new canvas. What that does is that it incorporates the white paint into that yellow to give a blend already. And to get that circle, I've gone around and I've been able to do a C on this side and the B, the circle of the B, in order to get that nice round shape. Now we're going to start adding the darker colors as we go out into the sky instead of the sun. So I'm going into a cadmium darker yellow, and I'm going over that yellow. And I haven't washed my brush yet. The colors are still going to be blending so that it's not too defined. And where I see the line between the light yellow and the dark yellow, if I go over it again, it'll start blending it. I'm just going lightly over so that we don't have that big line there. Now I'm just adding water. I'm not really washing off my brush, and I'm just going to make that yellow line a little bit bigger so that when I come in with my next color, I have a bit more of surface to play with. So now I'm going to start right into that red. And again, I'm going in the circular motion that goes on top of the yellow, and the red's picking up some of that yellow to give that blended effect, and it creates that aura around the sun. You'll notice that I'm keeping my brush in the same direction so that the yellow, whatever was touching the yellow, stays touching the yellow. So I'm turning my brush to really keep the colors corresponding in their right spot. Now that I have the basic shape, now I'm going to go and wash my brush. And get all those, because now I have the white, light yellow, dark yellow, and the red in my brush. So it's going to be giving it a good wash to be able to get that color off. Because I'm going to start back on the white and blend it all the way out again, getting that nice shape of a round sun. And then I'm going to start going outwards and get the blending of that aura. So when you're painting, one of the things that really matters is the way that you do your brush stroke. If I was to do the horizontal or the vertical, it'll give me a very different effect. So I'm keeping in that round and turning my brush so that I get that nice coverage. So now the center is almost done. So I'm going to go and get some of the red, and it's a nice cadmium red. The difference between the cadmium red and some of the other reds is that the cadmium actually makes it a nice, bright, pure color and gives a really good coverage, so it doesn't turn as pink or purple as some of the other reds would. There's some rose reds that you can get, the different crimsons and things like that, but the cadmium gives that nice bright red that we think of when we're talking about our primary colors. So in the same way that I did with the dark yellow, I'm just widening that aura so that I have a surface to come in and add my darker color to. When I'm doing that, I'm being very careful not to create a very distinct line in that aura, and I'm leaving that blending of the yellow and the red there. And then we come in with our darker color, which is the maroon, and I'm gonna do exactly the same thing, cover a little bit of the red on the outside and create a dark circle with the maroon. Once the paint is on there, then I can come back in and make sure that the brush strokes are nice. The nice thing about acrylics is that when you add water, it does extend the blending time. If you need a bit more blending time, you can just add a little bit of medium to it. And it's clear, so what that does is that it gives you, it doesn't change the color of the paint, but it does give it a little bit more time before it dries, because the acrylic in a background like this, well, in about 5 or 10 minutes is going to be too dry to blend. Like this area now is already too dry to blend. So now I'm going to go in, wash my brush, just because that dark color does show up a lot on top of the red. So I'm going to go half over the red and half over that maroon and blend that line again. And by going over it but not having a lot of paint on my brush, just what's on the canvas, what it does is that it picks up a bit of both and blends and blurs that line, so you're not getting that defined line even though you've changed colors. And if you notice on the sides, I'm not going up and down the sides, I'm keeping in that round motion even up in the corners, and that helps create that effect of an aura. So you can do this with pretty much any color. If you did it with the white going out into a darker blue, you can do it with the greens or the purples, and it will give you that same effect of the different kinds of sunsets you can get, or sunrises or skylines. So now I'm just going to fill in a little bit more at the bottom here with the maroon. And then, as simple as that, you can have a really nice background for any type of picture that you wanted to put on there. So you can add trees, you can add the mountains, you can add flowers. You can do it daytime or nighttime, even more abstract. But it's a nice way to get a background pretty easily without going into too much detail, but it gives you a really nice effect that draws your eye right into it. So today what we're going to be doing is adding a mountain range and a lake in the front. So the way that I'd like to get the perspective is to play with the colors. I'm going to change from my flat brush to an angled brush, and this one has it's a bit angled and it has a shorter end and a bit of a point on that one. So before I go into a dark color, the mountain range that's in the furthest area, I'm going to go back into the red. It's going to pick up a little bit of this maroon. And the way that I'm doing the mountain ranges is just doing triangles. And if some areas have more paint or some areas have less paint, it works. To start, you can just start doing the straight shape of a triangle, and you overlap them so that some of them are higher, some of them are lower. If you start with that triangle, what you can do once you get used to doing that shape is that you can just wiggle your brush a little bit on the way up and a little bit on the way down, and that'll give you some of the depth and different rock edges and mountain edges in that mountain range. So because that paint underneath was still wet, when I put my brush on, it does take some of it off, but I use that to my advantage. Instead of worrying about it, I go, that's actually adding a little bit of depth because it lightens it. So I'm gonna leave it like that, and that's fine. On the top of the mountains, now, because they're not very visible, what I'm gonna do is the sun is coming down, and some of that light's going to reflect either on the snow peaks or on the sides of the mountains. So I went and got some of the cadmium yellow, the darker one, and all I'm going to do is gently bring my brush on top, and just ever so lightly I'm going over the edge of the mountain in the direction that the sun is going to be hitting it. So here, both sides are going to get it. And again, it's that wiggling motion on the tops of your mountains. On this side, the mountains that are on this side are going to have it on the left-hand side of it. And that gives you the impression that the light is bouncing off of that there. And it doesn't have to be perfect because it's so far away that you don't have to have all the precise details. It'll look fine. As we get closer, now I'm going to go into the darker maroon and just add a few mountain ranges in front that are a little bit lower, and then go in with just a touch of the yellow and do the same thing. Bring some of those highlights to the tops of them. Now, I'm not very worried about what's showing through and what's covered, because I'm going to now come in and put a nice mountain that's closer to it. That's going to have some trees on it. So I have the same angled brush. I've washed off the red paint, and now I'm going right into the Mars black. So here I'm going to decide how big I want it and what type of mountain I want. So I'm going to come in and be bold, and I'm just going to outline. I'm going to get a bit more water on there so I have better coverage, and that's one of the tricks, right? If you see that you're seeing through your paint and your canvas is coming through and your paint isn't spreading, add a little bit of the medium to it. In this case, what I'm adding is water. So I'm adding that nice mountain range, and again, it's going to be that triangle shape, and I'm just wiggling it down to about halfway. And now on this side, same thing, it's just that wiggle. In the dark color, you get to see a little bit more about what that wiggle looks like now. I'm just going to fill it in, and when I'm filling it in, if I was to do all straight up and down, my mountain will look very tall and it'll have a very strange shape. So when you're filling in whatever area you've just painted, the outline, when you're filling it in, try and maintain what you think that surface is going to look like. Just in case you still see it afterwards, you're better off keeping some of that texture that looks like the mountain ranges while you're there. I'm going to go, I went and got a little bit more black, and what I'm going to do on the front here is I'm going to start putting in some trees. So the way I'm doing it is that when I'm painting the mountain, I'm using the broad side of the brush. So I'm making sure that the full surface of the brush is touching the canvas. When I want to do trees, I'm turning the brush so that it's vertical and only the small surface is touching. And what that does is that it gives you the nice thinner line that you can use to create a tree line on the top of whatever area, or to make that tree line in a forest, let's say. When I do trees, especially in the distance, try not to make them all the same size, because then it starts looking like a picket fence. So I do some that are taller, some that are shorter. I space them out, and then sometimes they're overlapping, and sometimes it's only the point that's showing and the rest is still in here. So because I want that same texture throughout this smaller mountain, and I don't necessarily want all of those mountain ranges to show up, all the edges, I'm just going to keep on coming down here with that same vertical technique. There. I'm going to wash off that black. Now that we have the mountains that are furthest and then a little bit closer, and now we have one that we have the detail, but because the sun's hitting the other side of that ridge, right, that's where we're coming in here with black, because the sun isn't hitting it, so you won't see it. I've picked up a little bit of black and I'm going to go into the maroon, because on this side here where the mountain is not, I'm going to add just a little bit of a tree line. So again, it's just using that brush vertically. I'm adding a little bit of a tree line with the maroon and a bit of black on this side, so that I have, and then the bottoms of the trees, I'm just going to come in and make sure that I have more of that black, so that we have the shadow of the edge of the forest there. And that's going to be one of the horizon lines of where the water is going to meet with those trees. And if you notice back here now, it's actually, your eye doesn't go to it, so all the little places where that it's lighter because of the canvas, or that the yellow is showing up, it's not the focus of your painting, but it just adds to it. So that's why you don't have to be too worried about things that are in the background. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to do the water. So the trick with water is to have it be very, very level on a horizontal plane. If you start going into that bowl shape, once again, you're going to start getting that it's going to look like your water is moving up the sides of your painting. If you put them and it starts to slant, it's going to look like it's running out, much like if you were doing a waterfall off the side. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding the same maroon, because it's whatever color you use in the sky, you can use in the reflection of the water, because water doesn't have color, all it does is reflect the light, and this reflection is going to have on the edges the dark maroon. Same with here, I'm going to add a little bit of that maroon on the edge. But where the mountain is, now I'm going to go and get the black and create that horizon line. A few of those trees, that tree line. And then I'm going to go in with the black. Keep on going with that lake down here. Make sure that all my trees come all the way down to the lake, so that they're not floating and they're not necessarily all the same height or distance apart. The reflection that's going to be in this side of the lake is of that mountain. So here, that water, which is horizontal and very level, is going to be reflecting that mountain. So wherever that mountain is, you create the mirror image, and the mirror image is from here. So the points there, it's going to come down on this side and be covered in like that. The sun in the middle, now we're going to start going into the lighter colors that are there. So what I like to do often is start with the lightest color. So I'm going in with a little bit of the white that now has a little bit of gray. Just spread it out. And that won't be bad because it's just a bit of the reflection of the water anyway, so I'm not too worried. Happy mistakes. I'm gonna go in now. I didn't wash my brush. I'm just picking up some of the yellow to come in and add some horizontal brush strokes, touching over that white, bringing it in, even with a bit of the black. That's all right because it's going to be reflected, which is fine. I'll wash out a bit of that black. And then the last pieces of water are going to be that nice cadmium red. If you want, one of the ways that you can avoid having the colors blend is to do it in the same order that you did the top there. So start with the white, the yellow, and then the red, and the maroon, and then you can come in and do that black. I don't mind painting over the black because I find that it creates that nice blending of the colors for that edge. For that medium yellow, or that darker yellow, I'm just going into a smaller brush, and I'm going to come in with the dark yellow, and I'm going to, between the yellow and the red, and I'm going to add a few of the smaller water lines that are still horizontal. If I'm picking up too much red, go in, wash it off, come get a bit more of that yellow, and then as you move over into the red, it'll start blending it, which is one of the effects that I like. On this side, between the red and the maroon, I'm also putting in a bit of that yellow just to show that there's a reflection of the light in the sun. There's a bit too much black there, so I'm just coming in with a bit of that yellow. Get rid of a bit of that red, add some of the yellow on there. And then lastly, I'm going to come back with my bright yellow and just in that white, add a few thin lines. So I'm not pressing hard, and I'm making sure that I'm varying the length and the width of those lines a little bit to get that irregularity of water through the reflections. One of the things I like to do is where you have that line between the trees and the water, often I'll come and I'll just make sure that there's a bit of a lighter edge, even underneath here, where the mountain's reflecting, just so that you know a couple of the rays might have bounced around and come back, and just so that you see that there is that difference. So now that we have the basics of our water and our mountain, I can come in and just do some of the last reflections in the shaded piece of the mountain. So that one, I'm going to use that dark maroon and come in and add a few of the water lines. If you notice, I'm not actually doing the big wave shape, and they're mostly very straight lines that go from thin to thick, or are just one, like a dash, but that are a little bit longer than a dash, in order to keep that nice level lake. I'm going to wash that off, and I think that we have room over here. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to go into a detail brush, so it's a very small brush, and I'm going to come in and right about here, I'm going to add in a line because we're going to add in a sailboat. So from there, there's that T shape, the upside down T shape. So here's the mast for the sailboat. And then I'm going to come in. There's that one triangle. And then here is the back of the boat. I'm going to fill it in just in black. So you're getting that shape. The boat's sitting in water, so you aren't really going to see the bottom of it. But the way to make it look a bit more realistic is that there's going to be that reflection of the boat in the water. So here, you're going to see that reflection. The way I like to make the reflection right next to the boat is going to be very dark. But as the reflection comes out, then it becomes a little bit more like the dashes and reflecting on the water. So it'll be not quite as solid. And some of that light's going to be coming through and bouncing around. And then here's the mast being reflected there. And then you decide which side you want that sail to be on. And we're going to go to the front here from the tip and come to the tip down there. And just like that. Sometimes it's scary to start that line and get it on there. The good thing is if I didn't like the line, all I would do is come up, make that a little bit longer, and then cover it over. And nobody knows how big that sail actually is supposed to be. Now that I have it drawn, I can go into my bigger brush, go and get some of that black and fill that in. I'm going to come straight across. And fill that in almost all the way. With the sail, it's going to come into, there's a little bit of a curve here so that the mast is here and the sail curves in the front. Now, for the details, here I'm just going to paint a little box for the cabin. Maybe a little rail. Make sure that I do the same in the reflection, the box. And here is that sail. And just like that, we have that reflection for our sunset. So thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time, where I hope that you can learn a little bit, try it out, and give painting a try. Thank you for joining me. We'll see you next time.